how Black girls' self-esteem would be if their identity was respected amongst the Black community, specifically their families. Black women do not get to unexperience the trauma and scarring caused by this. Black women are forced to confront their self-identity as negative until they're old enough to unlearn it on their own.
Being a student athlete during the track and field season, I find it sometimes difficult to maintain a constant relationship with God. I want to attend church every Sunday, but having track meets every weekend often makes that impossible. At times, I feel like my relationship with God is hindered, but I have found that prayer and reading scriptures on the bus are my best ways of coping with not being able to physically hear the word of God in church as much as I want.
Receive comments such as, "She is too white because I got good grades and spoke properly," or "You don't even want to be Black because I prefer the suburbs to the city," because that was how people viewed me. I felt that was how I was supposed to be, a whitewashed Black girl.
Good evening. I am Melanie Spate-Daniels, the president of the National Coalition 100 Black Women Delaware chapter. I welcome you tonight because the National Coalition 100 Black Women Delaware chapter is indeed an advocacy organization, and we are the voice for Black women and girls promoting leadership development and gender equity in the areas of health, education, and economic empowerment. So in addition to being the voice for the voiceless, we have created our own training program, civic engagement training program, Marianne Shad Carey and Margaret Rose Henry Civic Engagement. We also provide programming across the state, and of course, during the pandemic, we had the initiative Beyond the Mask. So we are very active in the state of Delaware, and now one of the most important things that we do is research. So 2018, we began with State of Our Union Black Women, mainly because we did not have the data to support Black girls. So I welcome you tonight to share in this incredible release of the State of Our Union Black Girls in Delaware. I am happy to share that you will hear the voices of Black girls, and they will be sharing about their frustrations for the present, confronting those areas that make them feel uncomfortable, and demanding a different future. I am happy to share this stage with my Vice President of Programs, Sharice Brewington-Carr.
Thank you, President Daniels, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a bit about the purpose. The National Coalition of 100 Black Women believes that you don't get to be a healthy, strong, educated, resilient, happy, and resourceful black woman without being a healthy, strong, resilient, happy, and resourceful black girl. Our mission to advocate on behalf of black women and black girls requires that as we do this, we learn, inform ourselves and others, challenge ourselves, our perceptions and bias to see the truth. And yes, sometimes we fight unapologetically to tell our stories. When we began to consider how we approach this work, it was organic. As President Daniels said, in 2018, we issued the State of Our Union report about black women in Delaware and realized we learned a lot, but knew we needed to reach back to her, that black girl. We learned there was no formal data that told the stories of black girls, by black girls in Delaware, and not unlike much of what we have seen nationally in print media, anecdotally in our communities, and not unlike many black women, black girls are often misrepresented. We think this must stop. This is historic research. There is no other like it, and we believe that black girls deserve no less. Our intent is to contribute to policy discussions that positively impact the lives of black girls in Delaware, as well as ensure with stakeholders, like all of you joining us here tonight, that the needs of black girls are seen and resourced equitably. So along with my sisters, members of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, we considered what we wanted to learn. We asked ourselves some questions without assumptions. Those were, who is the black girl in Delaware? What is her story? How could she help us tell it? What was her actual, not perceived lived experience conditions? She is not a monolith. We are not all the same. How does she strive, cope, and maintain resilience? In other words, what things work for her? We knew we wanted her story to be authentic. To her and for the community to understand, we needed to find some friends to help us, and we turned to the following key partners. We wish to acknowledge and thank them for their tireless commitment and dedication, and continue what we know will be continued involvement in this movement. Research Center, Education and Social Policy with the University of Delaware. The University of Delaware's Partner for Healthy Communities. The Department of Health and Social Services, the Division of Public Health. Delaware Center for Clinical and Transitional Research, Excel, CTR. And Delaware's only historically black college and university, Delaware State University. Thank you, President Dr. Tony Allen, Dr. Devonna Williams, the chairperson of the board, and Dr. Myrna Nurse, the Director of Women and Gender Studies, for their contributions in the personal narratives written by undergraduate students at DSU. We are thrilled to consider this body of work a movement. So the plan for our time together tonight is as follows. We will have a word from our Honorary Chair, Dr. Cassandra Coase-Johnson, Associate Deputy Director with the Division of Public Health. The State of Our Union Black Girl Report will be done by Dr. Katrina Morrison. There'll be a question and answer period. We ask that you place your questions in the chat during that time, and Kristen Williams-Chandler, NCBW board member, will help us to facilitate those questions with Dr. Morrison. Monica Shockley-Porter, our NCBW program committee co-chair, will moderate our Black Girl panel called What She Said, and we'll have remarks by Rita Landgraf, who is the director of the Partnership for Healthy Communities. There will be a call to action by our own Ray Jones Avery, NCBW immediate past president, and also my co-chair in this important work. Now it is my pleasure to hand this over to our Honorary Chair, Dr. Cassandra Coase-Johnson, Assistant Deputy Director with the Division of Public Health.
Thank you so much, Sharice. I firmly believe that this work and the ongoing work of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women and its partners will make a positive impact on the lives of Black girls and women for many generations into the future. I am humbled and grateful to be the Honorary Chair for this work. I've been engaged in public health and community-based nonprofit work for more than 20 years. In my experience working in communities and looking at the data from a practitioner perspective, Black women and girls are among the most vulnerable populations in the world, not just in Delaware. in just about any category you could think of: health outcomes, economics, workforce, safety. They face, we face, too many inequities to count. This work is very important to me personally because I am raising 2 young girls and a young niece. So I feel an urgency to help change these conditions for them and my future grandchildren. This work adds to the body of growing empirical research that illustrates we must do more as a society to support Black girls and Black women. There's an East African proverb that I often turn to that translates into something like, and I'm paraphrasing, if you think you are too small to make a difference, you haven't spent the night with a mosquito. And I think this work represents that sentiment. Before I turn it over to Dr. Katrina Morrison, I just want to do a couple of additional acknowledgments. This was truly a collaborative effort, and I want to make sure a few additional people are also acknowledged. I'd like to acknowledge our former Secretary of Health and Social Services, Rita Landgraf, for her support and leadership. You'll hear from her a little bit later. I'd also like to acknowledge our former Secretary of Health and Social Services, Dr. Kara Walker. It was her bringing myself and Ray Avery together several years ago around the need for additional data around women and Black girls that has led to this iteration of the body of research that we have here tonight. I would also like to thank our current Secretary of Health and Social Services, Molly McGarrick, for her support in this effort, as well as our Division of Public Health Division Director, Dr. Carol Rattay. Dr. Rattay has allowed me, and also many of the staff that work within the Division of Public Health, the time necessary to really dedicate and lean in to this work. And that included epidemiologists, communication staff, our community health staff, and our maternal and child health staff, who have all played a role in helping to develop this work. I would also like to give an acknowledgement to Helen Arthur. Helen Arthur is our Health Promotion and Disease Prevention Section Chief within the Division of Public Health. When I went to Helen and started having conversations within the Division of Public Health around the need for funding for this project, she did not hesitate. She simply said to me, Cassandra, this work must be done, and I will help find the money to fund it. Thank you, Helen. It is your lack of hesitation and jumping right in that allowed this work to accelerate in the time frame that it was able to happen. I would also like to thank, again, all of the partners that have participated in this work, including Delaware State University, and also Dr. Katrina Morrison and her team at the University of Delaware. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Morrison.
Thank you so much, Cassandra, for that introduction. And thank you to everyone for being here this evening. I see that the chat is very lively, so please let me know if you cannot hear me, and I'll be sure to modulate my volume. My name is Katrina Morrison. I'm a researcher at the Center for Research in Education and Social Policy, also known as CRESP, at UD. And I'll be sharing highlights from our research project. Before I jump into that, though, I do want to express gratitude to folks who helped make this research possible and the products possible. I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Sue Giancola for providing oversight and direction at critical junctures during the project, for initiating some very important discussions early on, and for the continued encouragement. Thank you to Dr. Tia Barnes for initially leading the project and for designing the research, designing the data collection instruments, and coordinating with all the partners. Yu Shah, thank you so much for your assistance with survey implementation and data analysis, in addition to recruitment of survey participants. Thank you to Shamika Jelenowitz for your help with interviews and with analyzing survey data. Thank you to Dr. Hillary Mead for your help with analyzing interview data and writing reports. And thank you to Terry Ann Richards for reviewing transcripts, assisting with gift cards, analyzing data, and being a great thought partner throughout the project. Thank you to the CRESP and UD community. And lastly, but certainly not least, thank you to all of our study participants, all of our girls in the study. We could not have done this without you. I'm going to share my screen now to make it easier for the audience to follow along with the findings that I share. As I share my screen, I'll remind you to continue using the chat to share reactions, questions, uh, anything that you'd like to share as my conversation continues. And at the Q&A session, we'll be able to facilitate the conversation using those questions. So I'm thrilled that I get to share these highlights, and I was honored to lead the project from September 2020 on. So my agenda tonight is straightforward. I like to share the why, the how, and the what. Why study the lived experiences of Black girls in Delaware? How did we collect our data? And what did we find out? So starting with why elevate the experiences of Black girls in Delaware? So we know that a lot of the discourse has focused on Black boys and Black men, but what gets lost in those conversations often are the unique experiences of Black girls. We need research, particularly about Black girls, so we can drive targeted policies and programs that help them thrive. I also want to point out some major findings from previous research studies that help fuel the impetus behind a project such as this one. Black girls are devalued on the basis of race and on the basis of sex, and oftentimes this happens simultaneously, creating unique experiences of oppression. Black girls are often adultified, and this means they're not viewed as children, as innocent, as those who deserve leniency when they transgress, the same ways that other children of other racial groups might be viewed. And this sometimes results in serious, even violent consequences. And Black girls experience weathering. This refers to the erosion of physical and mental health over time after exposures to systemic racism, discrimination, adversity in all forms, and having detrimental impacts on one's health. The picture to the right there is of Naya Kenny. Back in 2015, she was a high school student at her school in South Carolina, and she witnessed a Black female peer being thrown from her desk by a white police officer. Uh, Naya encouraged class members to record the event using their cell phones. Naya ended up being arrested along with Shakara, the girl that was thrown. So I use that story. It's one among many where we have these negative experiences of Black girls that show criminalization and adultification, and overall a dehumanization of Black girls. I hear echoes of Sojourner Truth's "Ain't I a Woman" in these kinds of stories. It more resembles "Ain't I a Girl?" So we need more research that humanizes Black girls. So how did we conduct this research? So there was a survey administered online via Qualtrics in summer 2020 and then in spring 2021. The survey was anonymous and it was actually made up of 4 different measures. The YRBS, the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System, which asked many questions around health. The PYD, the Positive Youth Development Questionnaire, which asked a lot of questions about character. The Kid Screen 52, which asks a lot of questions about health and relationships. And the PRACY, the Perceptions of Racism in Children and Youth, which asks a lot about experiences with racism. So together, those measures made up our survey. The survey took about 15 to 20 minutes to take, and participants received a $5 gift card for participating. We also conducted focus groups and individual interviews over Zoom from the summer of 2020 to late fall of 2020. Those focus groups, they lasted about an hour, hour and 15 minutes, and participants received a $10 gift card for participating. Originally, the plan was to conduct all of this in person, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, we pivoted to using virtual means. So that means a lot of our recruitment happened via virtual channels, but we were able to recruit from schools, from different community centers, and just through our networks. Our target population for both data collection strategies were Black girls ages 10 to 19 who live in the state of Delaware. Topics included for both data collection strategies were physical health, nutrition, relationships, experience with racism, how girls describe themselves, and a host of other topics. And then in our interviews, we were able to also ask, what supports do you need to thrive better in Delaware? I will point out that a number of our survey participants also participated in our focus groups. Not all of them, but some of them. So we did have focus group participants who had also participated in our survey. So this work will result in 6 main products, 5 research briefs based on our interviews, organized around the topics listed there: health, image, racism, safety, and resilience, relationships, and support. And there will be 1 brief based on the statewide survey. And tonight, as I present, I will be I will have a parallel to those topics and present in that order. The briefs will be made available on the NCBWDE website. Right. So without further ado, what did we find out? So starting with the survey findings, we see here that with among our age groupings, we have most of our participants came from the ages of 10 to 13 years old. And in terms of county, we see that most of our sample came from Newcastle County. A total of 185 participants took our survey. I have a note about our age groupings. So in literature, the ages 10 to 13 is often denoted as pre-adolescence, and 14 to 19 is adolescence. And as such, the YRBS tool and the Précis tool were designed so that those age groups were split, so that there were questions pertaining to 10 to 13-year-olds and questions pertaining to 14 to 19-year-olds. And you'll see some of my results tonight are divided in terms of that. But we broke down the adolescent age even further, keeping our focus groups in mind, thinking that people within the ages of 14 to 16 have more in common with each other in terms of experiences, and those within the 17 to 19 age group would have more in common. Thinking early high school to mid high school, maybe similar experiences versus those later in high school and may have graduated. Okay, so that explains the groupings, and you'll see some of our results broken down in that way. I'm sharing highlights tonight in hopes that this sort of gets you a sense of the reports that will be coming out. And there were many, many data points that we could discuss, but I wanted to highlight ones that sort of could start the conversation around policy-driven decisions. So, starting with health, the amount of sleep and the amount of time that folks were on electronic devices was a concern. So, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that children ages 6 to 12 receive at least 9 hours of sleep per night. We see that a little over a quarter of our 10 to 13-year-old girls reported getting 9 hours or more per night. But this meant that 74% were sleeping fewer than 9 hours per night. Similarly, turning to the 14 to 19-year-old age group, we noted that 18% of 14 to 19-year-olds were sleeping 8 or more hours a night, meaning 82% were sleeping fewer than 8 hours per night. And the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that those 13 and older get at least 8 hours. So, in thinking about what's associated with lack of sleep or diminished sleep, it could be diminished memory, or it could be trouble regulating mood. And then, even over time, it could have a correlation with obesity. It's really important to think about A, the amount of hours our girls are getting, but then B, what could be keeping them up from getting that amount of sleep. We see that half of our respondents said that they spent 3 hours or more per day using electronic devices. So this included social media, okay, for something that was not schoolwork. So we're keeping in mind this is during the pandemic, and we can understand why folks might be on their screens more during shutdown. However, that also might bring to light why we should talk about this even more, because being on electronic devices is also associated with negative health outcomes. Being on them for too long of hours. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that folks don't spend more than 2 hours on their screens. So seeing that half of our respondents are spending 3 or more hours on that could be a concern. Turning to body image, there is some indication around a, a strong interest in changing one's body. And we noted this particularly among the 14 to 19-year-olds. So, 2/3 of our respondents said that at least sometimes they worried about their appearance. And then half of our 14 to 19-year-olds versus a third of our 10 to 13-year-olds said they were trying to lose weight. You see in the table on the right, you see the response categories and the percentages under each response category. So we see under the lose weight what I had just stated, but also according for those who want to stay the same weight, it was about the same, but as far as proportion wise between the two groups, 20%. For those who wanted to gain weight, it was a little higher among the 14 to 19-year-olds. For those who weren't trying to do anything about their weight, we see that 30% of 10 to 13-year-olds answered that one, but versus 12% of 14 to 19-year-olds who were trying not to do anything about their weight. So we need to think about what could be behind those kinds of decisions. Is it health? It could very well be being conscious about your health and wanting to lose weight, wanting to change your body. But we also know that beauty ideals circulate and permeate society and media and discourse. So thinking about what could be behind this is a cause is a point of interest. So turning to character, our girls in our study appear to value social justice, generosity, and empathy. So we see that most of our respondents thought that these following statements were extremely important: giving time and money to make life better for other people, helping to make sure people are treated fairly, and speaking up for equality. We see that the percentages are really high for folks who thought those were extremely important. And then turning to the way girls would describe themselves, and there's these statements saying, "Would these describe you? How well do these describe you?" We see over 80% felt like the following described them well: feeling sorry for individuals when being picked on, seeing another person who is hurt or upset and feeling sorry for them, and being bothered when bad things happen to good people. So, along those lines of humanizing, we see that our girls really valued justice and fairness and feeling sorry for folks who might be downtrodden or who might be beaten down for some reason. So turning to connections to neighborhoods, it was a little concerning to see that half of our respondents disagreed that adults in their city or town listened to what they had to say and cared about them. We need to think about the ways in which our neighborhoods and communities are lifting up our Black girls, are making them feel welcomed, are making them feel valued, are making them feel listened to. Because while we could say close to 50% agree, we see that half of them don't agree with that sentiment. So, thinking about our communities and our neighborhoods, how these villages are raising our Black girls and showing them that they have their backs. Connections to schools. So, most respondents said they did well in school. However, we also see results that show that there's some not they weren't as happy in school and they didn't necessarily believe their teachers encouraged them. So we see two-thirds indicated that they did very well or extremely well in school. And I have the distribution of the other answers there. But it might be a beating the odds kind of situation going on here. Because only 35% said they were very or extremely happy with their schooling. And then, though the percentage is relatively small, it's still concerning. It's still substantial to see that 17% of our girls did not believe that teachers encouraged them, and 16% felt that their teachers did not care about them. So that could be really concerning to think about. Do our girls believe that the teachers they interact with on a daily basis care about them, see the best in them? But we do see that they see themselves doing well in school despite that. Turning to relationships with family and peers. So we saw that respondents showed they feel loved and cared for and supported by their parents. However, when it came to relationships with their friends, the results were a little more mixed. So over half respondents indeed said they felt their friends were always good friends, but this also meant that 40%, 42% felt they were not always good friends. And then a little over half indicated they could not always trust their friends. So again, this is kind of community in a different way. What's going on in Black girls' friendships where there might be some trust that's a little diminished? Turning to experiences with racism. So in the précis, the girls were asked about situations that happened to them according to their race. These were yes no questions. The situations included hearing insulting remarks based on your race, being assumed to not be smart, being treated unfairly by teachers. So here I have the percentages of those who said, yes, this happened to me. We see the top answer, the ones with the highest percentage, was hearing insulting remarks. 62% of our girls said that. Now, I will note that our results seem to be shaped by age group, in that more 14 to 19-year-olds said they experienced these situations versus 10 to 13-year-olds. Specifically, in terms of insulting remarks, among the 14 to 19-year-olds, 84% said that this happened to them versus 34% of 10 to 13-year-olds. Being closely watched in stores, 49% of 14 to 19-year-olds said this happened to them versus 18%. So it causes you to think about, is it around awareness? Because that came up in some of our interviews, asking some of our younger girls, have you experienced racism? Oftentimes, younger girls said no. It could be around awareness, it could be around protection. Going back to some of the adultification literature, is it that maybe older girls aren't being as shielded from these situations as younger girls are? The asterisks denote that these were questions asked only of 14 to 19-year-olds, is the way the précis was designed. But we see 60% of our 14 to 19-year-olds experience the assumptions of not being smart. In the précis, there's also questions around how you responded to these situations and what were your feelings. So common feelings were frustration, hurt, and sadness. And common reactions were speaking up, trying to forget about the treatment, and ignoring the treatment. And that lands heavy for me thinking about the weathering. and thinking about those subtle ways that situations and experiences could be tearing at our health, mental health, and physical health over time. I'm going to turn now to our interview findings and what we found out there. So, similar to our survey findings, I wanted to share with you our distribution, our sample. So, 70 girls participated in our interviews, and you see, similar to the survey sample, 20 for most girls came from the 10 to 13 age group, and most girls came from the Newcastle County. And I will say, we wanted to set up focus groups so that there was this great cross conversation among girls, and oftentimes for scheduling reasons, we would have one-to-one conversations, and those turned out to be very fruitful too. But in total, whether they were focus groups or individual interviews, we talked to 70 girls. So, starting with health, from our findings, we found that there were certain factors that influenced physical activity and nutrition. So, first off, the people in your household. The people in your household, they bring food home, or they encourage you to exercise, or they do activities that involve physical movement. That influenced either your physical activity or what you ate. The girls' own interests in eating healthy or participating in exercise played a role. Having adequate time to exercise and adequate time to prepare healthy meals was a facilitator of nutrition and physical activity. And having the convenience of and access to healthy, affordable food and safe, available spaces to be physically active. The quotations here speak to these facilitators, and I'll give you time to read those because I just want you to be able to take the quotations in. So another finding around health that we talk about in our health brief is the role of social media. And a number of girls talked about the ways in which social media interfered with their sleeping. So we have a quotation there that speaks to that finding. So turning to image. The ways that Black girls describe themselves were positive. Funny, nice, goofy, outgoing. When we said, how would you describe yourself? These are the words that we heard. We also heard some more nuanced descriptions: unpredictable, problem solver, resilient. But again, these were neutral, not necessarily negative. So, again, pushing against some of the myths that might be circulating or negative depictions are really important, having girls speak for themselves on who they are. But also in our image brief, the conversation turned towards the racism girls experience. So that bleeds right into our racism brief. So girls talked about racism that they experienced in their community, in their extracurricular activities. Like one girl was saying she was looked at as sassy on social media, and then also vicariously through family members. One girl talked about how her family faced colorism, which is privileging light skin over dark skin, and how she felt the brunt of that, knowing that her family members with darker skin were being treated badly. But most of our examples around racism that we heard from our girls was in terms of school. So, Black girls reported hearing and experiencing stereotypes and negative assumptions about their academic abilities and behavior. And we have two quotations that speak to that finding. So, turning to safety, we ask girls, what makes you feel safe in your neighborhood? What makes you feel safe in your home? What makes you feel safe at school? So, emerging from their responses were four major themes. So, first, sources of safety came from knowing the people around you and knowing that they cared about you. So, in the home, knowing your parents, knowing your siblings, knowing your grandparent, and knowing that they were looking out for you. In school, similarly, knowing your teachers, strangers in the neighborhood would make folks feel unsafe. Sources of safety was feeling welcomed and valued as a Black girl. This came up in school a lot in terms of lessons and discussions where Black girls felt included and seen. It also came up in the home. Emotional safety came up in terms of in the home. And so feeling valued and feeling like someone was listening to you at home, similar to the earlier bullet around caring, helps someone feel safe. The absence of violent incidents. So knowing nothing bad happened in your neighborhood or at your school or in your home helps someone feel safe. And then also security guards, equipment, dogs, these kind of apparatuses that are associated with security and safety would make Black girls feel safe. We have a quotation there that speaks to a Black girl feeling safe in her neighborhood because of the people in her community. Safety also came up in terms of school. And so this quotation speaks to the need to have safety, not just physically, but emotionally in school and what that could look like. Returning to resilience, we ask girls about resilience and also the supports and relationships in their life because your resilience, your ability to bounce back, is sometimes dependent on the supports that are around you. So, not surprisingly, Black girls felt their strongest relationships with friends and parents. But additional sources of support were grandmothers, siblings, cousins, godparents, and counselors. I did want to point out, though, that a few reported that they mainly relied on themselves. We asked girls about their strategies and examples of resilience, and as far as getting through tough situations. So, some strategies were crying, thinking self affirming thoughts, breathing. And the quotation to the right there speaks to the self affirming thoughts, someone sort of affirming in themselves who they are and how that could get them through a tough time. In the resilience brief, in the final brief, we also ask girls what supports do they need to help them thrive in Delaware. So, Black girls talked about wanting additional health and recreational programs. The first quote talks about a need for mental health specialists. The second quote just speaks to a space to just be and hang out. I'll end my presentation with the words of one of our participants that really speak to the need to take up this charge of helping Black girls thrive in this state. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to your questions. But in case we don't get to all of your questions this evening, please feel free to email me at katrina.m@udel.edu. I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A.
All right. Dr. Morrison, thank you so much for sharing a lot of information in a short period of time. I can tell from the chat that people were really engaged and excited to hear and really wanting to learn more about the status of Black girls in Delaware. So thank you so much for your research. There are lots of questions, and one of the questions that we wanted to start with, and interestingly, that seems to be on the minds of many, is like, why a study just on Black girls and not include Black boys?
Well, and thank you for the question. There have been many studies around Black boys, rightfully so. And we know the ways in which racism affects Black males and the way that just ongoing discrimination on all fronts, especially at the intersection of class and other identities. But a lot of the discourse, you can find so many books, so many research studies dating back decades and decades on Black boys and Black men. President Obama, as much as we miss him, he had a Black Men's Initiative, My Brother's Keeper. What about My Sister's Keeper? So just turning the spotlight on Black women for the reason of just putting more attention on their unique experiences. Because while they might have something in common with Black boys in terms of race, their gendered experiences create unique other kinds of experiences that we need to look at. But also, it's just these gender, besides the whole kind of comparison, because we don't want to do an oppression Olympics and say, well, this group needs this, read this, I think in this whole, where society and of domination and different groups are being marginalized, there should be studies all over the place. But with Black girls, you have this intersection of racialized experiences and gendered experiences, and then bring into class, bring into uh, other sexuality. There's so many identities at play that create unique experiences that should be highlighted. And because it's a unique experience of oppression that might not be discussed enough.
And it is absolutely a unique experience, which is why we endeavored on this work in the first place. But interestingly, another question that came up is, are you aware of other studies that are similar to this in other states or communities across the country?
Absolutely. So when I refer to the adultification, the most recent study, because Kimberly Crenshaw has written about adultification, other authors have written about adultification, but a very recent study out of the Georgetown, out of a research center at Georgetown Law, just 2 years ago, pointed out the adultification of Black girls. There's also Monique Morris's Push Out, talking about the criminalization of Black girls and touching on all these topics. That's more of a more global study or more like nationwide study, but nonetheless, the themes in there can apply to different contexts. So those are two studies that come to mind. As far as specific states, like I said, the one out of Georgetown was particular, and I think there have been other articles written about different populations. Dorothy Roberts has written about populations in Chicago. But at this scale, I think this might be one of the first.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. And it's interesting, you talked about Kimberly Crenshaw. She is a member of the coalition in the LA chapter. And so it's just amazing that this work continues to come together in special ways. One of the questions we have here is, what might educators do differently to address implicit biases in the classroom?
Hmm. Yeah, it's always tough. I mean, I think sometimes it starts with addressing those biases head on, no matter what racial category you fall into. But especially those who aren't marginalized, so white educators in particular, having really tough conversations about the biases they might not be aware of. And then I think with that awareness, should come some work, should come some.
Mhm.
So how do these implicit biases play out in our practices, play out in our policies that we might not be aware of? So I think introspection is a great start because you're walking around, you're interacting, you're developing the policies and tools, but then look at the things that are in place and critically examine those. Think about, are Black girls showing up in lessons? How are you talking about Black girls and women? Are you starting in the side of being victims or in poverty or slaves? Are you starting with queen conversations
Mm.
and royalty? Are you showing the gamut of experiences in Black history? Are you even talking about Black history at all? Or are you waiting until February to talk about it? And are you talking about Black females in history? So I think introspection first, and then moving into the things around you that kind of represent the values of the school. And do they reflect Black girls? Do they reflect the interests of Black girls and the needs of Black girls? I think those could be a start.
That's very helpful. And you talked about so many things, and I think one of the things that seems to have caught an interest from a number of people is the issue of safety, right?
Mm.
And Black girls feeling safe. And so the question was, could you define safety, in the context of this research? And then what was the main concern? Was it physical safety, emotional safety, or both?
Well, I think safety, broadly speaking, was kind of being shielded from harm doing, feeling like
Mhm.
no harm was happening to you. I think we deliberately didn't define it for the girls because we wanted to see the kind of answers they would provide. And we found that they talked about physical safety and they also talked about emotional safety. In the quotation I shared about what happens in school, we see that the girl says, emotionally a little murky. And then when we talked about safety in the home, folks was, I feel physically safe in my home, but sometimes conversations with my parents, I don't feel listened to. The emotional safety isn't there. So girls would discern for themselves as they were talking about safety, what they were referring to. And I think we wanted it that way. We didn't kind of want to impose on them a definition of safety or what kind of safety because, we wanted to see where their answers would fall. And I think we would probe, though, if we found them, talking about physical safety a lot, we would probe on other forms of safety, but often it came up on its own.
Yes, lots of conversation happening in the chat here. Let's see. Next question was, what can we do to provide after school programs that focus on the needs of Black girls?
Hmm, let's see. So, what could we do to provide after school programs? Well, I think going back to the findings, I mean, I think even taking a step back, we might need some funding and some infrastructure
Right.
because I was going to say we need space, safe spaces, um, physical spaces with lights and equipment and so that takes money and that takes a commitment. So there needs to be, a commitment to kind of building infrastructure so that there is after school programs that are available for girls and with the space and the tools that they would enjoy using and that could help them further in education or further their careers. So I think and then I think people So capital in terms of people, so people who are staffing those that have obviously an interest in Black girls, but perhaps they represent a discipline or some kind of interest area that could help the Black girls thrive in a particular area. So if someone wants more education enrichment, for instance, having someone who is qualified in that realm at an after school program, someone who wants dance, someone who's qualified there, someone who wants coding or tech work, someone who's qualified there. So I think that again speaks to kind of like the infrastructure there, but we need the spaces, we need the people, and then we need the interest areas represented. And it might be a if you build it, they will come situation, but it has to be there.
And building it with the kinds of information that we know that they want from us, the kinds of things that they're looking for from us. And it's interesting. One of the things that we are seeing is that I think, and I felt this as I was listening to your report as a Black woman. It was heartening to hear, happy to hear that Black girls were having positive feelings about themselves for the most part. Did this surprise you? And I guess I'll ask one more question. What else, when you think about like all the work, and I know it's a lot of work, but were there certain things that just surprised you, that you heard from the girls?
Yeah. Well, starting with your first question, it did not surprise me to hear the positive words girls said about themselves. It didn't surprise me. For one thing, the girls we talked to were very pleasant and often funny, and so the joy they brought to these conversations was apparent. So they didn't bring that negative energy, and it just felt like their spirit, their character wasn't carrying that either. So it made sense when they described themselves. It was positive and light. But also in some of the literature that I consulted, surprisingly, give it's surprising juxtaposed with some of the other narratives out there. But I remember reading somewhere that Black girls actually do show high self esteem,
Mhm.
do have high self-esteem, and it might be buttressed by communities and by cultural events, or just their own sense of self. So that wasn't surprising. But as far as what was surprising, let's see. I think it was surprising. I don't know if surprising the word. Sometimes it was heartbreaking to hear about the the hate in terms of race
Yeah.
within the Black community. So I told you colorism came up with one girl talking about her family members, but with a few people, it came up in terms of them just sensing, their darker skin didn't get them as better as good treatment as other people, especially if little being made fun of for skin tone and other features that are related to race. So one girl talked about her wanting to change her nose.
Mm.
And it's heartbreaking to think about within the community, those kind of discussions going on. Um, yeah, I'll stop there, but I think there was just some heartbreaking findings, but I wasn't surprised by the ways that they positively described themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you were sharing the findings, I was thinking, some things are obviously, conversations that our girls are having, but I felt like, my God, I was having these conversations years ago. And so there's so much work that we still must and have to do. Um, Trying to look here. Um, oh, interesting. It says, oh, this is the next question. It said, did it seem like many of them were faith based? And does that help? Do you think that helps with their self esteem?
Yes, I see that question too. Oh, most definitely. I can't. It wasn't an explicit question. I do know that a good number of our girls did bring up faith and how that helped them through tough times. So I think it would be speculating. I would think it does have to do with their self esteem, but it's not something that we explicitly asked about. Although I mean, I do in the literature around resilience, faith is one of those avenues again for support that can help hold up a Black girl.
Yeah. And so, what made you hopeful about this research? What are some of the things that gave you some hope about how the girls feel about themselves, what the community can do, what organizations like NCBW can do to hold up Black girls in this community.
Mm, yeah. Well, definitely the positive words about themselves definitely made me hopeful that despite uh, narratives that might depict a negative picture and just negative experiences, despite that, girls do still see themselves in positive light and still have that strong character. um, I also thought it was hopeful just when they answer questions around the supports they needed, they had really great ideas. And it's a great reminder of how much we should listen to our young Black girls and women. So just their intelligence and their wherewithal with what they need and where decisions could be made made me very hopeful. Another thing, there were a couple of leaders that we talked to who led different groups um, in their respective communities. So it just made me very hopeful to hear from these young women that they were starting their own initiatives. You know, going back to the survey, something there made me really helpful. So going back to health. Something I didn't bring up that will be talked about in the report uh, is about healthy beverage consumption, and not a lot of girls said they drank soda. And I actually thought, like, because it could be tasty, it could be, but it's just like it actually was really great to see like healthy behaviors. And to be honest with you, most girls said they were physically active, and for that to stand even during the pandemic was really great to see. I think some of the nuance was how many days they were active, but a lot of girls, engaged in healthy behaviors. So that made me joyful. Um, but yeah, and then also the supports
Yeah.
that the girls have in their lives from themselves, because it might not necessarily seem as a bad thing to support yourself, but having that kind of self-reliance, but also other folks, whether it's their parents, cousins, godparents, counselors, teachers. It was great to hear that some girls do have those villages around them and they do rely on them. So yeah, there was joy there.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It's, I think, a good place to wrap. There are lots of questions, and I'm sure that people will email you, and we'll continue to provide forums for people to engage around this research. But thank you, Dr. Morrison, so much for the work you've done, your time today, answering all of our questions, and we look forward to to continue engaging in the future.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much.
much.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you, Dr. Morrison, for that wonderful information in that report. And now we have the opportunity to introduce our panel of what she said. We're going to hear directly from Black girls about what they thought about what was said in the report, their findings, and et cetera. So it's my pleasure and honor to introduce that panel. And I will start with our moderator, Monica Shockley Porter, who is a native of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but she moved to Kent County, Delaware in 2019. And Monica is a member of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, of course. She is our program co-chair, and she's done an amazing job there. She has had over 20 years of combined experience in both social services and business development. And she's been responsible for marketing, outreach, management of several types of programs and projects. And she has been a community relations director of business development, therapeutic foster care. Monica earned a BS in criminal justice from Savannah State University and MS Administration of Justice from the University of Louisville, and an MBA from the Liberty University. She has recently been named as the public relations manager from the Capital School District under the leadership of Superintendent Dr. Valencia Cade, who is also an NCBW member. And now to our Black Girl panel. We have with us today Ms. Hannah Carter. Hannah is a senior at Wilmington Friends School. Hannah is currently exploring her love of music and performance through several performance groups, including her school's jazz band, chamber choir, and the Clifford Brown Jazz Festival Orchestra. Hannah is the recording clerk in her school's student government, clerk of the Black Student Union, and head of the Spirit Committee. Hannah's goal is to connect with others and show the beauty within diversity. We also have with us this evening Amira York James. She's a 19-year-old artist originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and a graduate of Mount Pleasant High School. Amira is an apprentice studying under the tutelage of visual artist Amir Campbell. Amira's ambition is to teach and lead Black generations towards mastering emotional intelligence and overcoming unproductive mentality habits. She believes that you cannot believe in stereotypes if you also believe in individualism. And we have Layla Walker, who is a junior at William Penn High School located in Newcastle, Delaware. Layla is currently exploring early childhood education as a career pathway through the Future Entrepreneurs in Creative Industries internship program at Christina Cultural Arts Center. I give to you the Black Girl panel, What She Said. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us this evening just to talk about your experiences as young Black women, and also just to discuss what your thoughts are, what your feelings are about the data that has just been revealed. We received an enormous amount of information regarding the state of union of Black girls here in Delaware, and my first question that I want to ask you guys is, with the findings that we highlighted tonight, how did you feel? Was there anything that you wanted to hear more about? Was there anything that you wanted to dig deeper on?
When I was hearing the statistics of what all of us go through, I didn't notice how common it was for all Black girls to go through what we all go through. And I'm thinking that, you know, maybe this is not a normalized thing, but it is. And as we talk about it, I realize so many things that we go through is because of we don't know that it's so normal that we go through, so we stay silent and we don't say anything about what we just kind of walk it in our own way, which makes us strong, but it also makes us fall into the same pattern. You know, from generations to generations, we all go through the same thing. So I didn't know how normal it was. Did y'all know?
I had no idea. I've gone to a primarily white school for my entire life, and I found unfortunately, a lot of self-hatred. And it's tough when you don't see yourself represented, and we saw that in some of the findings when people felt that their teachers didn't support them or that they felt singled out in their school community. And hearing these findings, it just illuminated to me how many of, like you said, Black girls go through this similar struggle. But it also illuminated for me all the positive things that we have to say about our own kind within this community, about how we are kind and smart and outgoing, and how that is the image that I believe is accurate and that the statistics say are accurate. So I really appreciated the study, because this is the kind of thing that we need in our community to know, like you said, that we are not alone and that people are interested in what we have to say and how we feel.
Exactly.
Layla, did you have anything to add?
No, I feel like what they said was pretty good, but something I'm really surprised to hear about is how when you guys went over like the body image thing and how many young Black women are aiming to lose weight and all that, it was really sad to see that so many are unhappy with the way they look, even though they might see like they're constantly told that they're not beautiful enough, or like you can see a white girl, or I don't want to say that, but one that has the same body type as them, or they might get uplifted, but another one, they're instead of rambling.
It's okay. So our Vice President, Sharice Brewington Carr, makes a statement that I love, and she says that none of us get to be Black women without being Black girls first. So in listening to this research, I felt seen in my younger years. Did you ladies feel the same way? Did you feel seen by this research? Did it really resonate with you?
Yeah, it did for me because as you know, you're going through your individual journey, you're kind of feeling like there is no one that can help you, or there's no one that can say anything that would make your journey way like more acceptable towards yourself. Because you might speak about what you're going through, but it doesn't really resonate exactly because it's the emotional trauma that a young girl goes through that makes her young years so memorable and so distinguished from any other race. So I think that really did resonate with me for real because all in all, being a black girl doesn't just mean being a black girl. It also means being that black girl who didn't love herself, that black girl who didn't understand why she felt a certain way about certain things that was going on around her, that black girl who didn't understand love because it wasn't a representation in her family, that black girl who didn't know what a man was supposed to be for her or a boy was supposed to show for her. There's a lot of things that goes into it because we lack a lot of things in our community that should be present. So yeah, it did resonate with me.
Yeah, personally, the family things didn't quite resonate with me because I'm fortunate enough to come from a very strong and very loving family with two black parents who are very proud of their heritage and everything that comes along with the culture. But the school things definitely resonated, and I think the thing that really struck me the most was about, first of all, representation, especially in size and body image. I was at Target last week buying a present for my first grade buddy, and I was shocked to see just how many black Barbies there were in the toy aisle. And they were skinny, and they were curvy, and they had afros, and they had braids, and I was just almost in tears just staring at these Barbies because when I was
We
her
didn't
age,
have that growing up.
the
We
best
didn't.
we had was a darker version of the super blonde holiday Barbie with
Right.
super long, black, very straight hair. And I think the other thing for me was about just how you feel in your school community. I know that, you know, when you're little and everyone has crushes, I felt less desired, even up until high school, because of my skin, because the white little boys and girls went after other white little boys and girls, and preference is a preference, but it definitely has an effect on you, and everyone is getting that attention, and you are saying, I'm not getting it, and there's one difference between me and them, and it's my skin color.
Right.
So I think that I'm really happy that this study is occurring because it's just very important that the black girl experience is being highlighted because it's something that is very often overlooked. I was at the Met a few weeks ago, and there was this beautiful print of this black woman, and in her headscarf there were names of all these phenomenal black women in history: Ida B. Wells, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman,
Right.
and the piece had a huge title, and it said, "We were there, we are here, and we are going to be here." And it's true. Black women are the foundation of the nation. They're the foundation of this culture. They are the foundation of everything that we do. So this study that specifically set out to highlight our experience and everything that makes us unique and beautiful. I mean,
Special.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, most of it, the school thing didn't really resonate with me as much as the family thing did because I was raised in a broken home. Mom and dad separated, siblings going off doing what they're not supposed to do and stumbling on paths that was very harsh to the eye and can't even imagine what they was going through emotionally. But because of that, I was absent in school. Because of that, I didn't really care about how I was desired, how I looked. It was very like trying to figure myself out from the inside out. So like, what is love? Why is that even so heavily dependent on in the black community? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So like, being raised without a father, even though I knew my father, he wasn't really there as of everybody else. Going to like my friend's house and seeing how her family moved and noticing that mine is dysfunctional and hers is normal or is what normal is supposed to be or something like that. So yeah, the family thing really did resonate with me. And I say like as a black female, you kind of have to you fall on one spectrum or the other. You can't really have both of them. Even though you have so many different struggles, there's always going to be that one struggle that pinpoints you in your life. Like, I couldn't focus on school because I was focused on what was going on in my household. So it was like I had to choose one path to go on, and it wasn't academic. It was that focus of like, what's love type of focus.
So what about you, Layla? Was there anything that specifically resonated with you? Anything that you can just think of that jumped out during the study?
I don't have anything.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right.
I have another.
You have an. Okay,
I do one more
yes,
thing.
yes.
Just the finding about what age a lot of the black girls were when they felt racist acts towards them. So I lived in the suburbs, and unfortunately there was a white supremacist who lived directly across the street from us. And shortly after we moved in, President Obama was elected, which was obviously his favorite thing. And it was just an interesting experience because when you're 5, you don't understand why you suddenly can't play with your neighbors. You don't understand why someone is making threats against your family. You don't understand why the color of your skin makes you so worthy of this kind of mistreatment. So to see that there were less young girls that had experienced that really made me optimistic, because even though racism is still alive and well, at the same time, more people are willing to stand up against it, or at least shield their children from it so it doesn't impede upon their childhood. So,
Do you think that something like talking to your children about racism or something is important? So like instead of shielding it and making sure they don't see it, is it more important for them not to see it than to see it? Or is it more important for them to not understand it than to understand it growing up?
That's good. I can speak for myself as a parent. I think it was something that I talked with my daughter about very early on. Just because the way that the world is set up, there are differences. So we lived in Kentucky during the time that my daughter first entered school, and the area of Kentucky that we lived in, she shared some of the same experiences, and she started to come home and question, like, Mom, why? Or the kids are making remarks. And so we had to have the talk. So now looking back, I wish that I had the talk with her before she went to school and experienced those things. So I think it's so important that, when you do have children, that you prep them for things that they may experience, because it is painful having to explain those things that happen, unfortunately, in the world that we live in.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get back on track. And then one of the things that stuck out to me the most, where I felt the most seen, and I want to see what you ladies think about it, is the adultification of black girls, that they're not seen as, little girls, that they're given these adult characteristics by others. Did that resonate? Did you feel that way, or did you not? It's okay if you didn't. I grew up in the inner city, so I felt a lot of that just based on like where I grew up and the experiences that I had, but you may have a different perspective.
Okay. Well, yeah, when I was young, I was kind of looked at as like the mother child, like the young girl that kind of always had children on her hip or something like that, or taking care of my cousins, my nieces, my nephews. At a very young age, I was seen to be responsible for younger versions of me, So like, I do think we are very, very, I don't know, we're expected to be more adult-like than childlike because of the way we are raised. Like, we're given more responsibility, especially as girls. I'm not sure how young boys go through, but I know that as females, watching my other friends in their households and stuff like that, they're given more responsibilities as well. So I know as me being the mother child, I never was like a I don't know if like you're thinking like sexual or something like that, because some children, they'll put on like crop tops and switch their hips going down the street and stuff like that. I wasn't more like that. I was more like the mother. So, but there is a lot of problems within our community with that as well. Yeah.
Ladies, have any
I actually
experiences?
have. Okay, so I feel like all the time when I go online, I see like it could be summer. There's a young black woman, she's just wearing a tank top or shorts, and all of a sudden she's trying to be grown or she's just trying to show off her body. Sometimes when we have more curvy bodies or like, a bigger butt, it's seen as a problem, even though it's not our fault. Like I can see girls of other races wearing the same exact thing, but they always target the little black girl for wearing what she wants to wear, being comfortable. Like crop tops, like if it's hot outside or something, I don't think it's too big of a deal. But like girls of other races, that's completely okay. That's normal. Even sometimes if like young black girls want to flat iron their hair or something, I've even seen something as simple as that be seen as too grown. It's like everything we do is constantly judged, and we can't just wear what we want to wear, do what we want to do. It's always seen as a problem.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. I personally didn't feel that I was adultified. However, I've seen way too many posts of a similar nature about a little girl. She straightened her hair, but she didn't bump the ends, and now she's fast, or now she's trying to act grown. And I think it's just unfortunate, and it's sad because at the end of the day, a child is a child, no matter how much they are sexualized, and they are still learning. And if they are taken advantage of, if the things that they do naturally are turned into things of a more vile nature, that's not the child's fault.
Yeah.
And I think there are different features of being a black girl and a black woman that make you mature faster, especially if you have that maternal instinct at a young age to want to protect your brothers, your sisters, your friends, and then you see people who look just like y'all getting beaten or being killed. I think when we talk about being adultified, it has to have more implications than just sexualization.
Just the physical appearance of
Right.
it. It does, because there's way more that goes into being an adult than just looking like an adult. And I don't think a child looks like an adult anyway, even if she throws on the crop top and some shorts.
Yeah.
That doesn't make her an adult. You can tell, obviously, she's a child, but that's just them being threatened by her maturity and her ability to catch on to the world. I think people are threatened by females who can adapt and do well, no matter how old they are, So, yeah.
I have one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
Another thing I see all the time is maybe a male family member's coming over or whoever, a male family friend, whatever. It's always, you need to put on like longer pants, you need to put on a bra, something like that. It's, why can't I be comfortable in my own home? If you think you're inviting somebody over that would look at me strange, that's not my fault. You need to reevaluate who you're bringing into your home around your children. And it's so strange too, because their sons are always walking around with like basketball shorts and no shirt, but we can't wear shorts or we can't wear tank tops because we'll make them uncomfortable. If that makes them uncomfortable, they need to think about themselves. They
We're
need to
taught at a
reevaluate.
young age to be our unauthentic selves, even in like workplace. Like if you go to, like I work at Whole Foods, so I'm surrounded by a lot of white and very money facet people. So when I'm at work, I have to turn off my black girl and turn on my watered down black girl. You know what I mean? Because
The code switch.
that code switch, exactly. We have to code switch, because if we don't, we're seen as a threat and we're seen as unprofessional and unintelligent. And it's quite frankly the opposite. That just shows that we're strong enough to be ourselves. But that's a struggle in itself, because from a young age we're taught to please others before we please ourselves.
Exactly.
So I think black girls should be like we're not really taught how to please ourselves, but we should be taught how to take care of ourselves as an individual, for our mental state and our emotional intelligence as well.
I think
Amen
you're
to
completely
that.
right. I think also it's tough, and it's even harder to explain to a little girl that as a black woman, you will never fit into that Eurocentric beauty standard that is being placed upon you. And you can be gorgeous, and you are gorgeous, but your hair will likely never be straight enough. your body just won't fit those standards.
Yeah, it just won't be laid enough.
Exactly.
Curling up, and the heat is always gonna make you sweat your edges
Right.
out, and you always gotta have lip gloss on, because if you don't have lip gloss on, then you're not black. But then if you, there's different stereotypical things that we go through as Black females.
So let's pivot a little bit to all of the information that we've discussed, and just even in relating to one another as Black women. How can we help? How can NCBW help the plight of Black girls here in Delaware specifically?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first step is what we're doing now, just having these conversations, and being interested in what we have to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Conversations. We don't have enough conversations.
Yes.
We don't talk enough. We don't say enough. We don't explain enough. We don't show enough. We hide everything. We hold our shoulders high. We walk down the street with no emotion because we have to, so people don't see that we're, so that we don't see that we're weak. We try not to show any weakness, but I feel like these conversations are necessary. Like if we had a podcast for Black girls in Delaware of waking up in the morning, listen to the podcast. Oh, I feel like this today. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put on an extra little eyeliner, make my wing a little longer, just because I feel like it. You know what I mean? It's
And
a rebellion.
The ladies are taking notes, right?
That's what I do anyway. If I feel like I'm waking up and I don't feel so much like myself, I'll go as far as drawing like a symbol with my eyeliner on my forehead, so I can feel better, and I can be like, oh, I'm gonna attract this energy today. I'm gonna attract some positive energy because I woke up with negative for some reason. You know what I mean? It might be the night before, but I feel like we should have conversations, way more conversations than we do, because we don't at all, probably.
So it sounds like just having more forums like this. Was there anything that you wanted to add, Layla?
I say having more Black women in more leadership roles and being okay with just seeing that, because there's always those companies that are like, we care about diversity, but the diversity is one Hispanic person and like one Black girl, and then all the supervisors, all the bosses, everybody, they're like older white men. And when Black women try to take the initiative and try to build their way up to the top, they're always seen as like aggressive and bossy and loud, and are shut down from even being given a chance to speak like we are now, because they're seen as like a threat, like you were talking about.
I definitely agree. And the only thing I'd add is to just, that idea of like airplane safety we were talking about earlier, like putting on your own oxygen mask before helping others.
Yes.
A lot of times Black women are, superwoman, and they act because they know how it feels to be oppressed in a variety of ways. But if we could figure out ways to empower ourselves and be able to relax and let out some of that tension, and then sort of regroup so you're able to keep being an outlet for other people, but know that it's okay to let out your stress too.
Yes, absolutely. So my final question for you ladies, how can we involve you in this process?
Good one.
Most simple way I can put it is really just listening instead of immediately shutting down whatever we have to say as like talking back or being ungrateful, stuff like that. We just need to be listened to, and that's as simple as I can say it.
I think if we venture out into different environments and collect females from different environments, different backgrounds and stuff, to come and talk about the things that they go through, so we can reach as much individuals as we can through different walks of life. I think that'd be the best way to involve younger females into thinking and expressing feelings like these. Because, when you're younger, you feel a certain way, but you don't know why. But if we have, people talk about it, and you'll be like, okay, you're coming from this background, and you're at this school, and it might be predominantly white, predominantly Black, whatever it is, they can just talk about it and just put their emotions on the table and be like, okay, this is how I feel. It might be wrong, it might be right, but this is how I feel, about the situation that I am in, and, how I'm dealing with it, and if it's healthy to deal with it that way, or if it's not, just giving advice to those who don't really know where to seek that advice from. Because, as me, I have to look to myself most of the time, and I can't really look to another broken female to tell me how to fix my situation when their situation is not even, dealt with at all to themselves, I don't know. So, trying to get advice from people who also know what you're going through. People who know, like, oh, I've been through that. This is the stage I'm in now, so I know what stage you're in, and I can help you, guide you to the stage I'm at, because that's a progression,
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is to say, like, to go to schools in the area and talk to those Black student unions or the Black girls in the area, because we all have found out that we are similar because of this study. But like we said before, that was something we didn't know. And I'd also say just to be willing to listen to our experience, because there are a lot of Black women of a variety of ages who have faced common things, but our experience as Black teens in today's day and age is different.
Yes.
Just because of social media, the current state of politics, the state of our climate, all sorts of things.
It's a different perspective of life that
Yeah.
others didn't have, growing up.
Yeah,
So we do have a whole different perspective,
Absolutely.
and it's wider, and it's kind of like you don't know where to look, and you don't know how to do things that you normally would know how to do. Like, being an individual is hard in itself. Like, you have to teach yourself to be yourself, and I think that's hard, especially for us, because social media.
Yeah.
And
Well, thank you so much, ladies. This was such a wonderful discussion. I'm so glad that you brought your authentic selves to the table. That was what we discussed before having this conversation, and I love that you just brought yourselves to the table. So we appreciate you for that. And I am going to be turning over the mic to Rita Landgraf. She's the Director of Healthy Community Partnerships for the University of Delaware.
Thank you. I came to this work, as you can see, as a white woman, one of privilege. Although I have experienced hardship, not once has that hardship been as a result of my skin color. I remain honored and extremely grateful to have been invited to this table years ago to explore advancing the state of our union, Black Girls in Delaware research, by identifying UD scholars to connect with the coalition, scholars interested in advancing this untapped field of study. As you have witnessed, this research was intentional at every stage to bring the voice of Black girls to the forefront. As you have seen and heard, we believe in the value of lived experience and the indicators that impact our well-being in health, our image, our safety, our relationships, supports, and our resilience. There are no finer advocates than the Coalition of 100 Black Women, and you will be hearing from Ray Jones Avery about the next steps in advancing this work through intentional action. Action is required by all of us, all ages, races, genders, and sectors, in order to achieve a flourishing society where individuals experience joy, health, they're capable and engaged. In other words, that they attain their highest level of well-being. We as a community and society are stronger through our diversity, not in spite of it. Our diversity fosters innovation and problem solving by pushing everyone to look at things from different perspectives. As I think about this work and my personal exposure to it, I have come to recognize we are not just building a culture of inclusion, but one of belonging, truly honoring the lived experiences and collectively advancing towards action that fosters the well-being of Black girls. It is so positive that over 140 individuals have joined us for this launch. However, this is not a one-time focus, and all of us must commit, remain vigilant, and hold our collective selves accountable to appreciate and understand the findings and advance with intentional action. We need to pledge to build a community of anti-racist and advance equality along with equity, especially keeping in mind the voice of Black girls. I came to this work as a white woman of privilege, and it was not clear if I even belonged around the table. I am very clear that as a woman and once as a girl of privilege, I must use that privilege to advance this change. This work opened up my curiosity to examine the ways in which my own assumptions and vulnerabilities interfere with another's ability to thrive. I practice avoiding those assumptions every day, and I commit to co-creating communities that can unite, strengthen, and prosper. I am forever grateful, especially to Ray, Charisse, and Cassandra, who invited me to the table where I continue to belong, and invite all of you to join us. Please welcome my friend, Ray Jones Avery, who will share the call to action and next steps.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you so much. Rita and I have known each other for over 3 decades. We worked together at United Way in the 80s, and I could feel her spirit then. Our collaborations and our friendship is priceless to me. I've never once muted myself in the room with you. You know that. I am unapologetically Black, and you are open, and you are welcoming to us speaking our truth. So thank you so much. Thank you. So the question is, what can you do? What can you do? Visit ncbwde.org starting Friday, November the 12th, to download the research briefs. Share the briefs with others, with stakeholders, with service providers, with elected officials, with neighbors, with other young women, teenagers, parents, those that in your community that must and should join us in taking action. Spend quality time with Black girls and adolescents. And Sister already said it. Listen, support, and see them. Advocate and allocate adequate funding for future research. From the very beginning, we knew that this wasn't going to be one and done. There are so many other avenues to explore. Advocate targeted and significant investments to better meet the needs of Black girls and adolescents in Delaware. What else can you do? Participate in our monthly action planning forums that will be facilitated by the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Delaware chapter, starting in January 2022. The forums will be organized around research themes supporting the briefs, and I will remind you what those themes are: physical health and nutrition, image, racism, safety, resilience, relationships, and support, and the survey briefs. So each month we will take a brief, a theme, and we will plan. We will look at what are our shared priorities, how can we gain alignment, how can we inspire collective impact, how can we hold policymakers and ourselves accountable. What metrics should we be defining to measure our impact, to drive equity for Black girls and adolescents across the state? Collaboration is nothing new, but collective impact initiatives are distinctly different. Collective impact initiatives involve a centralized infrastructure, dedicated paid staff. Can you say that, Rita, with me? Paid staff. Dedicated paid staff, a structured process that leads to common goals and a common agenda. Players must be willing to change. If we keep doing the same things over and over again and playing the blame game or turning a blind eye to the conditions that impact our children, we will remain in the state that we're in. We will be asking questions. What do we know? What do we need to know? What do you believe are opportunities to better support Black girls and teens? What is working? What is not working? And how can we advocate? Again, advocacy is key. So drop in the chat what you are willing to do. We'd like to give a special acknowledgement to our communications team, Deanna Sargent, and the phenomenal Alicia Jones. All of the design work, the videos, the save the dates, the website that you will go to, the landing page you will go to for the Black Girls Research has all been designed by Alicia Jones. And she is an example of young brilliance. So in the words of a brilliant artist and social justice advocate, Amanda Gorman, there is always light if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. This concludes the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated Delaware chapters State of Our Union Black Girls in Delaware launch. It's a wrap. Thank you.